So, Mr. President, I rise in strong support of the Credit Card Accountability, Responsibility, and Disclosure Act of 2009 and the substitute amendment that I've just offered on behalf of myself and Senator Shelby of Alabama, the former chairman of the Banking Committee. And as I said a moment ago, I want to thank him and his staff and, of course, my own staff who worked very, very hard on this issue. And I'll make specific reference to them during the debate, who have done just a terrific job in bringing this together in this bipartisan fashion. The bill before us addresses an issue of critical importance to millions of American consumers and their families, and to the stability of our financial system, and that is the need to reform the practices of our nation's credit card companies and provide a comprehensive regime of tough new protections for consumers. I want again to begin by thanking Senator Shelby for his diligence throughout this process. I want to acknowledge the hard work his staff has put in negotiating this important bill, along with my own staff, who've worked very, very hard on this matter. Americans know they have a responsibility to live within their means and to pay what they owe. But they also have a right not to be deceived, misled, or ripped off by unfair and arbitrary practices that have become all too common within the credit card industry. Banning those practices is especially critical today. Since the recession began in December of 2007, Mr. President, 5.1 million jobs have been lost in our nation, with almost two-thirds of those losses occurring in the last 5 months alone. It is clear the financial crisis is hitting American families very hard indeed. But precisely at a time when our economy is in a crisis and consumers are struggling to live within their companies too often are gouging them with hidden fees and sudden interest rate hikes that for many make the task nearly impossible. And with the average outstanding credit card debt for households with a credit card now nearly $10,700, credit card companies are making an already difficult economic downturn suffocating for far too many millions of our fellow American citizens. The range of abusive practices is as long as it is appalling. Retroactive rate increases on existing balances, double-cycle billing that charges interest on balances that the consumers have already paid, deceptive marketing to young people, changing the terms of the credit card agreement at any time for any reason on any balance, skyrocketing penalty interest rates, some as high as 32%. My colleague from New York, Senator Schumer, has called this tripwire pricing, saying that the whole business model with the credit card companies is designed not to extend credit, but to induce mistakes and trap customers in debt. I think he's absolutely right, unfortunately. This is an industry that has been thriving on misleading its consumers and its customers. If you need any evidence of that, just look at how they even hike interest rates on consumers who pay on time and consistently meet the terms of their credit card agreements. Take Phil Sherwood of my state, who always paid his bills on time, had a credit score in the 700s, and he's an upstanding member of his community, in fact, a city councilman in New Britain, Connecticut. One day, recently, he received a notice from his credit card company informing him that his interest rate was nearly doubling, and the associated fees in his account were going up as well. He had done nothing wrong, not been late, no changes whatsoever, just an arbitrary increase. A recent survey of the country's 12 largest credit card issuers by the Pew Charitable Trust found that Phil Sherwood wasn't alone. Pew reported that 93% of surveyed cards allowed the issuer to raise interest rates at any time for any reason. Between March of 2007 and February of this year, Mr. President, February of 2008, excuse me, credit card companies raised interest rates on nearly 1 out of every 4 accounts, nearly 70 million cardholders who were charged $10 billion in extra interest rate. That's within an 11-month period. That $10 billion isn't paying for college tuition, it isn't paying for groceries or for safe, affordable shelter in the midst of a housing crisis. It's going straight into the pockets of credit card companies, and they're doing it for one reason, because they can. Little wonder that we've seen a 10-fold increase in the penalty fees customers have been charged in the last decade alone. Even the federal financial regulators, who dropped the ball, in my view, terribly during the subprime mortgage crisis, have recognized the harm that these sinister practices pose not only to consumers, but also to our economy as a whole. Recently, in fact, the Federal Reserve, the Office of Thrift Supervision, and the National Credit Union Administration finalized rules aimed at curbing some of these practices. These rules are a good first step, and I want to commend them for it. They deserve commendation for having stepped up and proposed these regulations. These rules have made a difference already. But with our economy hanging in the balance, layoffs mounting, and consumers struggling to pay for basic necessities, I think the moment is right for more comprehensive reform, despite the good first steps of the Federal Reserve and others. Mr. President, I first began waging this fight to reform credit card company practices more than 20 years ago. Back then, it was difficult to get anyone to pay much attention to what was clearly becoming a slippery slope toward a more abusive and deceptive practices by these card issuers. It was a lonely fight in those days, but today we have an American president, President Obama, on our side. He recognizes that credit card reform isn't incidental to our economic recovery. As he has stated over and over again, it's essential to it. And he's pledged to get credit card reform done in short order, to quote him exactly, and said this weekend that he wants us to send him a bill by Memorial Day. And I intend to do everything I can, Mr. President, I'm sure my colleagues will, to ensure they meet that challenge. Not for the President, not for the White House, but for the consumers and customers out there who are waiting to see whether or not we'll step up on this side of the ledger and do something on their behalf. We've spent a lot of time in this body, a lot of time over the past weeks and months, to help out the financial institutions, to stabilize them, to get them on their feet, to get credit flowing again. And I believe those decisions, by and large, that we've made here have been the right ones, although clearly we could have started earlier. But now it's time to do something for the other side of that ledger. That is for consumers out there who deserve a break, particularly with practices, as I mentioned, 70 million raised alone in the last year, and people like Phil Sherwood having them raised for no reason whatsoever, solely but because the issuer can do so. So it's time we do this not for the President, not for the White House, but because the President would like it, but more importantly, but because the American consumer deserves it in these times to get the help they need in this area. And so today, as the Senate takes up the credit card legislation, we stand up for the people in this country who want no more of these practices. No more tricking customers into taking on more debt than they agreed to, no more taking advantage of financially responsible credit card users, and no more abuse of customers that goes unpunished. The time, Mr. President, has come to insist on consumer protections that are strong and reliable, rules that are transparent and fair, and statements that are clear and informative. Those principles, Mr. President, are the very essence of the Credit Card Act. And allow me to take, if I can, just a few moments to explain how the provisions of this bill will work. First and foremost, this legislation prevents unfair and arbitrary increases in interest rates and changes in terms of credit card contracts. Why is this so important? I recently met Christina Jorgensen, a graphic designer from Southbury, Connecticut, Mr. President. She transferred her student loans to a credit card to take advantage of the low fixed rate offer, only to have interest rates on that debt increased from 5% to 24%. Her monthly payments increased by $260. She had to cash in her retirement IRAs to pay off the credit card debt, all because she paid 1 day late by phone. Let me repeat that. Never in trouble before, saw an opportunity to pay off her student loans. And so she went out with that 5% rate she had because of her good record over the years. And all of a sudden, because she's 2 days late, one of them a Sunday, by the way, and because she paid by phone, not through the mail, her rates went from 5% to 24%, thereby crippling her ability, draining off that IRA. And she didn't graduate from college, by the way, a year or two ago. I'll tell you that she's far closer to my age than a high school senior or a college graduate as a normal age. So here she is at a point of retirement in her life where her IRA, her individual retirement account, now has been drained of a good part of its value because her rates went from 5% to 24%. Mr. President, what happened to Ms. Jorgensen is wrong. Having your retirement security wiped out is a frightening prospect under any circumstances, but it's positively terrifying during a recession.